What's up, guys? You guys are either on this video for one of two reasons. One, you saw the thumbnail and clicked, or two, you wanted to know which Galaxy Gals are overrated, underrated, or rated fairly by the Battlecast community. And if you're here for the second reason, or the first, honestly both are good because you're on the video, but if you clicked for either reason, then I'm going to explain why each of these Galaxy Gals are either overrated, fairly rated, or not rated highly enough. So these ratings don't make them good or bad, it just means they're not valued highly enough, or they're valued too highly, or they're right in the middle. And getting the list started is going to be Head Mistress Jean, who deals insane damage against random floating enemies with long range, with rapid attacks, and she is very effective against those two traits, but I wouldn't use her in a generalist lineup because the insane damage is what keeps her viable against them. Now, she deals well over 20,000 DPS against them at a level 30, which is really powerful. But do keep in mind that she has less than 4,000 DPS against other traits, so not very powerful despite being a long-range unit. And that brings me to my next thing. So she's long-range, so make sure to protect her. She cannot hit anything closer to 200 range to her, so make sure to meet shield and summon support when needed. But all around, a very powerful legend. Definitely at least in the middle of the pack of legends. I'd probably say she's in the middle of the pack of the legends, and quite good as a unit. Moving on to my first underrated unit of this list is going to be Wendy. And Wendy has Inner True Form, 450 range, deals over 15,000 DPS to floating enemies, and is very powerful. People know this, but what people might not know is the new Ultra Form that came out for her, which gives her over 59,000 about 59,000 DPS against floating. That is nuts. And it also upgrades her range, so she's dealing almost 60,000 DPS from 510 range. So I know the Ultra Form is something you get in late game, but you do have to keep that in mind. You just have to remember over 58,000 DPS. I mean, you have to comprehend that. That is insane. And the fact that she stands from 510 range means that she's very well protected, and anything that comes near her is going to get evaporated. Even late game, she's going to deal a ton of damage. So that's why she's underrated, because of her Ultra Form that people might not know about. And contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, I'm going to put Thunda in overrated for the first overrated unit of this list. And Thunda has less effective DPS and less range than Wendy, but against red enemies. So red enemies is a bit less power creep towards that, so that's still pretty valuable, but it's her survivability that's a real problem. She doesn't have a lot of health, and enemies can get into her and mess up the whole stage, so you don't want to let enemies get near her, even though she does have 440 range. Not bad. But the second reason why I think she's overrated is because she's pretty much the mascot of this event. Everybody knows who Thunda is, and most people will probably name her as the first one that comes to her mind, but she's not the best in this set. Pretty good, and if she gets an Ultra Form like Wendy, then she'll become phenomenal, just like her. But I don't think she's as good as Wendy, and I don't think Wendy gets as much credit as Thunda does. Moving on to Ku, who is fairly rated in my opinion. Ku is underwhelming as a generalist, and even against her niche, she isn't super powerful, but she does offer decent anti-black and anti-red support, and she has a strong ability against these two traits. So the strong ability keeps her usable, but an average specialist and a below average generalist. So keep that in mind. One of the weaker units in the set. Moving on to Kai, with a similar name, is also going to be in fairly rated. And Kai, people are quite familiar with, and at level 30 in her true form, 775,000 effective health against floating enemies. So very powerful, and as I said, against floating enemies, great tank and everything. And even as a generalist, has a couple 100,000 health. So if it's a mixed stage, as long as there's some floating, she should be all right. Good recharge time, so you can bring her back since he's a tank, and she does also deal a lot of damage per hit. So when she attacks every once in a while, she can get enemies off her back. And on top of that, her true form is immune to knockback, allowing her to be a better tank and not getting juggled around, so she could stay put in the front line and protect your units without being moved back and harming the rest of your team. Moving on from Kai is Coppermine, who before her true form was practically unusable and heavily replaced by Necromancer and other rares and cheap units. But thanks to the true form, she ended up getting a niche, and um, her niche is because her niche is in her ultra talents. So she has mini surge, which ups her DPS a ton. She also has time between attack reduction, so about 2/3 of a second is gone between that time between attack, which raises her DPS and makes her more reliable. And she also gains the zombie niche, so she is now able to freeze zombies and floating. So some usage is offered here, and the mini surge does increase her DPS. She's still a below average unit after all these investments, and those are heavy investments. Those are ultra talents, so please keep that in mind. Not the strongest unit, but she's not as bad as she was before she got a true form and talents. Before that, she was very outclassed and really didn't have a place in the meta. But moving on from Copper Mine is going to be Kisa, and I think Kisa is an underrated unit, and the reason why is because she has over 25,000 DPS against angels, combined with 355 range, and all of that with a 1-minute recharge. So for being a suicide bomber type unit, she just kind of runs into them and, burst damage. She is a kamikaze, for better words, but that is very powerful, and she is able to just completely evaporate angel enemies, and through that, she deals Bahamut-like damage with a 1-minute recharge, and if it's a mixed stage, then she's pretty solid, but I also wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend for you to stick with her niche, and she, as I said, she's very powerful against that niche of aliens. Moving on from that, we have Twin Stars, and Twin Stars, I believe, are overrated. And the reason why I say they're overrated is because their multi-hit attacks will cause them to miss, so that really does lower their DPS and effectiveness. And on top of that, their low health and low survivability causes them to get killed. They are powerful, but I do think Kisa is the better rusher than Twin Stars. And on top of that, Twin Stars, I believe, are a lot more mainstream than Kisa is. So that's my reasoning for that. And moving on from her, we have Marcia, I think. Marcia, yeah. And Marcia, I think, is fairly rated. And on top of that, she has multiple hit. So it could be a good thing, but not for her because her second attack is a guaranteed wave. So if she knocks enemies back on her first attack, her wave won't happen. She will not hit any units. And on top of that, she has a dodge against straightless enemies, and the dodge is inconsistent as it's only a 20 or 30% chance. I believe a 30% chance. So it's not very powerful or helpful if she doesn't stay dodged. I do think she's fairly rated because many people know about this and how she is not one of the better units on this list. Not horrible, but as I said, the problem is mostly her wave and her dodge, which are her two selling points. So not very good. Moving on, we have Lilin, and Lilin is going to be fairly rated as well, and she's decent against AKU and Angels. I do believe that she's a good shield piercer, but one of her biggest problems is her surge attack, which, it's good on paper, but the range is from like 100 something to 900 something, so it could land anywhere there, and it might not be usable or helpful. But if it does hit, it hits, and it's a nice bonus nonetheless, but inconsistent. Huntress Tarun is the next on the list, and she will be the third underrated, joining Wendy and Kisa. And in her true form, she is able to she's strong against red and aliens, and on top of that, she has a 100% chance of landing a 4-second slow, so she is pretty decent in that, but she also has a 20% chance of a savage blow. She's a Colossus Slayer, and she's immune to freeze and immune to weaken, all of that coupled up with a good recharge. So all of those abilities combined make her a well-rounded unit, and I do think she's a bit underrated for that. just because people might not be aware of how many abilities she has, between being able to use a guaranteed slow, being strong against 2 different traits, 20% chance of Savage Blow, which many units do not have, the Colossus Slayer immune to freeze, immune to weaken, and that combined with the 1 minute recharge. So all of that is a complete package, and that combined with pretty decent stats makes her a good unit. And next is going to be Pegasa, who I think is fairly rated. I will move there. And Pegasa has weak stats, and it might be the weakest unit on this list now that Coppermine has a true form. The weak stats, and she's outclassed against floating and zombies. And, she has a 6-second slow from a Conjured Spirit, which no other unit on this list has a Conjured Spirit, but the Spirit actually does more damage than her, so that's pretty pathetic. And on top of that, it's all with a long recharge. So she is painfully bad. And next, I'm going to, for bonus, include Nobel, which is the VIP unit that no longer is accessible, but she does. She gets you double money, and she has decent stats, but they're nothing special. So I'll just put her in fairly rated. But anyways, this is my list, and I believe that some of these units are rated too highly and not rated enough, or rated fairly for that matter. But if you guys agree, disagree, have any opinions, please leave them down below. Just keep the comment section civil. That's the only thing I ask you guys. And also, we're approaching 1,000 subscribers. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It means the world. And also make sure to like and turn notifications on if you enjoyed the video. But SpartanCat signing off, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.